The cantina fell silent as Commander Zethrak's 4 arms trembled around his drink. The blue-skinned Craxi warrior had seen more battles than most beings could count, but tonight something different haunted his yellow eyes. The younger soldiers gathered around his table, eager for war stories from the legendary veteran who had fought in the great human conflict. "You want to know about the humans?" Zethrak's voice cracked like broken glass. "Sit down, younglings. What I tell you tonight will change how you see the universe forever." The cantina's atmosphere grew heavy as Zethrak began his tale. His cybernetic arm, a replacement from the war, clicked softly against the metal table. The scars across his face seemed to glow in the dim light. "We called them the soft ones when intelligence first reported their existence." Such a foolish name. He laughed bitterly. "Their planet, Earth, seemed so primitive. No energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light travel. The High Command thought it would be a quick conquest, maybe a few rotations at most." A young Craxi soldier leaned forward eagerly. "But you defeated them quickly, right, Commander? The reports say the war lasted only 3 cycles." Zethrak's eyes darkened. 3 cycles. Do you know how long 3 cycles felt when fighting humans? It felt like 3 lifetimes. Every day was a nightmare that never ended. The veteran drained his glass and signaled for another. His hands shook as memories flooded back. "The first mistake we made was underestimating their adaptability. When our scouts arrived at their system, humans had just developed nuclear weapons. Primitive, we thought. We took our time preparing the invasion fleet, confident in our superiority." He paused, staring into his drink as if seeing ghosts in the amber liquid. "By the time our main force arrived 6 months later, they had somehow reverse-engineered our scout ship's technology. Not perfectly, but enough to mount a defense. How does a species advance decades of technology in mere months? We still don't understand it." The younger soldiers exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't the story of easy victory they expected. "The orbital bombardment was supposed to end their resistance in hours. Our plasma batteries could level mountains, turn oceans to steam. But the humans, they didn't break. They went underground, deeper than we thought possible. They turned their entire planet into a fortress." Zethrak's cybernetic arm whirred as he clenched his fist. "When we landed ground forces, that's when the real nightmare began. You see, we fight with honor, with tactics learned over millennia. Clean formations, organized strategies, rules of engagement. Humans threw all of that away." A female Craxi officer interrupted. "Surely their primitive weapons couldn't match our plasma rifles and energy shields." "Weapons?" Zethrak laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Humans turned everything into weapons. Household chemicals became explosives. Kitchen knives became instruments of terror. They used their own dead as psychological warfare, leaving booby-trapped corpses to demoralize us." The table fell silent. Such tactics were beyond their understanding. But the worst part wasn't their improvised weapons. It was their refusal to surrender, even when defeat was certain. A human soldier would fight with a broken rifle, then with their sidearm, then with a knife, then with their bare hands, then with their teeth. They never stopped fighting. Zethrak stood up abruptly, pacing as the memories consumed him. "I remember the Battle of New York. We had cornered a group of human civilians in a subway tunnel. Elderly, injured, children among them. By all military doctrine, they should have surrendered. Instead, they rigged the tunnel with explosives. When we advanced, they detonated everything, killing themselves and taking half my battalion with them." His voice broke completely. "The children, younglings, human children no older than our own offspring, carrying explosive devices. They would approach our patrols asking for food, looking helpless and innocent. Then they would detonate, taking our soldiers with them to whatever afterlife they believe in." One of the younger soldiers whispered, "That's impossible. No species sacrifices their young." "I thought so too," Zethrak replied. until I saw it with my own eyes. Humans don't just fight for victory. They fight for survival, for revenge, for concepts we barely understand. Love, they call it. They love their families, their homes, their freedom so much they'll die for it without hesitation. He returned to his seat, his massive frame seeming smaller somehow. 3 months into the invasion, we controlled all major population centers. The humans controlled everything else: forests, mountains, underground tunnels, abandoned cities. They turned their entire planet into a guerrilla warfare nightmare. The veterans' yellow eyes grew distant. Our supply lines were constantly under attack. Human infiltrators somehow bypassed our security systems regularly. They had no honor, no rules. They poisoned our water supplies, sabotaged our equipment, assassinated our officers in their sleep. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. But the absolute worst realization came when we captured some of their fighters alive. Do you know what we discovered? They were farmers, teachers, artists, shopkeepers. Not trained soldiers, ordinary civilians who picked up weapons to defend their world. If their ordinary citizens fought like elite commandos, what would their actual military be like? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. The real terror began when their proper military forces finally revealed themselves. We had been fighting their untrained civilians for months, thinking we were facing their best. We were wrong, so terribly, catastrophically wrong. Zethrak finished his drink and stood to leave, but the younger soldiers begged him to continue. "Please, Commander, what happened when you encountered their real military?" The veteran's scarred face twisted into something between a smile and a grimace. "That, younglings, is a story for another night. Some truths are too heavy to share all at once. But I will tell you this. After fighting humans, I wake up screaming every sleep cycle. Not because of what they did to my body, but because of what they taught me about the universe." He limped toward the exit, his cybernetic leg clicking against the floor. The universe is not civilized. It's not safe. It's not predictable. Humans reminded us that we are all just animals pretending to be something more, and when pushed to the brink, humans stop pretending entirely. As the cantina door closed behind him, the young soldiers sat in stunned silence, afraid to speak, afraid to think too deeply about what they had heard. None of them would sleep well that night, haunted by the image of a species so fierce that even the mention of their name could break a legendary warrior. Commander Zethrak couldn't avoid the younger soldiers forever. 3 days after his first revelation, they cornered him in the military archives, desperate to hear the rest of his story. His yellow eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, and his cybernetic implants sparked occasionally, damaged by stress and old injuries. "You want to know about their real military?" he asked, settling heavily into a chair. "Very well, but remember, you asked for this burden." The Craxi veterans who had gathered this time were different. Word had spread through the fleet about Zethrak's warnings, and now even senior officers wanted to hear the truth about humanity. 6 months into the invasion, we finally encountered what humans call their special forces. We had captured a strategic communications hub in the mountains, thinking ourselves safe behind our energy barriers and automated defenses. Zethrak's 4 hands moved restlessly as he spoke. They came in the middle of their planet's night cycle, during a snowstorm that should have made any assault impossible. Our sensors detected nothing, our perimeter guards saw nothing. Our automated systems registered no threats. He paused, his breathing becoming labored. The first sign something was wrong came when Sergeant Valrock failed to report in. We found him hours later, throat cut so precisely that he never had a chance to scream. The human responsible had somehow scaled a sheer cliff face in freezing conditions, bypassed our motion sensors, and eliminated our best perimeter guard without triggering a single alarm. A senior Craxi officer frowned. "One human infiltrator? Surely your response teams eliminated the threat quickly?" "One." Zethrak's laugh was hollow. "We assumed it was one. We were wrong about everything that night. While we searched for a single infiltrator, 12 human soldiers were systematically dismantling our entire operation from within. The room grew cold despite the heating systems. They moved like shadows, communicated without technology we could detect, and struck with precision that defied belief. By morning, 43 of my soldiers were dead. Our communications equipment was destroyed, and the humans had vanished like smoke. Zethrak stood and began pacing, his cybernetic leg leaving small scorch marks on the floor. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what we found in our computer systems. Somehow, during the assault, they had downloaded our entire tactical database. Troop positions, supply routes, command structures, everything. The senior officer looked skeptical. Impossible. Our encryption is quantum-based. No primitive species could break it. That's what we thought too, Zethrak replied. Until we realized they hadn't broken our encryption. They had physically accessed our computers using our own command codes. Codes they had somehow extracted from captured personnel without our knowledge. The implications hit the room like a shockwave. You mean they tortured the information from prisoners? Asked a young medic. Worse, Zethrak whispered. They made our own people want to help them. Psychological manipulation on a level we couldn't comprehend. Some of our captured soldiers genuinely believed the humans were the good guys by the time they were rescued. He returned to his chair, his massive frame shaking. The humans called it Stockholm Syndrome, but their applications were far more sophisticated. They would capture our soldiers, treat their wounds, feed them, show them images of their own war casualties, children killed in our bombardments, families destroyed, entire cities reduced to rubble. Zethrak's voice broke again. They made our soldiers see the consequences of our invasion from their perspective, and once a Craxi soldier understood that every human they killed was someone's child, parent, or mate, many couldn't bring themselves to fight effectively anymore. The room was silent except for the humming of life support systems. But their regular military forces were even worse than their special operations units. We finally encountered them in what humans call the Rocky Mountains. We had been fighting their civilians and guerrillas for months, slowly grinding them down through superior numbers and technology. Zethrak's eyes grew distant. Then their actual army arrived. These weren't farmers with rifles or children with explosives. These were trained killers who had studied our tactics, learned our weaknesses, and prepared for exactly this fight. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. They moved with coordination that made our best units look like amateurs. Every shot was precisely aimed, every movement had purpose, every tactic was designed to maximize our casualties while minimizing their own. The veteran's cybernetic arm began to spark more frequently. Their weapons had evolved too, no longer primitive projectile weapons, but hybrid technology that combined their ballistics knowledge with captured Craxi energy systems. Bullets that could penetrate our personal shields, explosives that could disable our vehicles, chemical agents that could bypass our air filtration systems. A female officer asked, "How is rapid technological advancement possible? It should take decades to reverse engineer alien technology." "That's what we couldn't understand," Zethrak replied, "until we captured one of their research facilities. Humans don't just study technology methodically like civilized species do. They experiment recklessly, take enormous risks, and iterate at impossible speeds." He stood again, unable to remain still. Where we would spend months ensuring a new weapon design was safe and practical, humans would build prototypes in days and test them in actual combat. Half their innovations killed the users, but the half that worked gave them capabilities that shouldn't exist. Zethrak walked to the window, staring out at the peaceful space beyond. Their tactics were even more disturbing than their technology. They fought like the entire species had studied our military doctrine for centuries. Every weakness in our formations, every gap in our protocols, every assumption in our strategies, They exploited all of them. He turned back to face the assembled officers. During the Battle of Denver, they used our own coordination against us. They knew we relied on hierarchical command structures, so they targeted our officers first. Not randomly, but in a specific sequence designed to create maximum confusion in our chain of command. The room had grown completely silent. They also used our honor against us. Craxi warriors don't fire on enemy medics or clearly marked medical facilities. Humans realized this and used medical personnel to transport ammunition, coordinate attacks, and gather intelligence. When we stopped respecting medical neutrality, they released videos of our forces attacking their hospitals. Zethrak's voice became bitter. Suddenly, every neutral species in the galaxy was questioning our methods. The humans had turned us into the villains of their war without us even realizing it was happening. A young engineer spoke up hesitantly. But surely our technological superiority gave us advantages they couldn't overcome. You would think so, Zethrak replied. But humans have something we lack entirely: desperation. When you're fighting for your species' survival, conventional limitations stop mattering. He returned to his chair, looking older than his years. They began using tactics that we couldn't predict because they violated every assumption about rational behavior. Suicide attacks weren't last resorts for humans. They were preferred tactics when the mathematics favored them. The veteran's hands clenched into fists. A human soldier would happily die if it meant killing two of us. They calculated the exchange ratio of lives like we calculate resource allocation, except they assigned infinite value to victory and zero value to individual survival. Zethrak stood once more, preparing to leave. But all of this pales in comparison to what happened when they finally went on the offensive. When humans stopped defending and started attacking, that's when we learned what true terror feels like. He paused at the door, his scarred face grim. The next time we meet, I'll tell you about the day humanity declared war on the entire Craxi Empire. Not just our invasion force, but our homeworld, our colonies, our entire civilization. As he left, the assembled officers sat in stunned silence, each contemplating the implications of fighting a species that treated warfare as a mathematical problem to be solved, regardless of the cost to themselves. The final gathering took place in Zethrak's private quarters, away from prying sensors and recording devices. Only the most trusted officers were present, those who needed to understand the complete truth about humanity. The commander's quarters were sparse, military efficient, except for one wall covered in medical charts and psychological evaluation reports. You want to know when humans stopped being the victims and became the monsters? Zethrak asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It happened on day 412 of the invasion, the day they hijacked one of our communication satellites and broadcast a message to our homeworld. The assembled officers leaned forward, sensing this was the heart of the story they'd been waiting to hear. Until that moment, the High Command on Craxus Prime viewed the Earth campaign as a minor delay in our expansion plans. They knew resistance was stronger than expected, but assumed it was temporary. Then they received a transmission directly from Earth's surface. Zethrak activated a holographic display that showed a recording device. I kept a copy. Though possessing it violates about 30 military regulations, you need to hear what the humans said to our leaders. The device crackled to life, and a human voice filled the room. The words were translated into Craxi, but the emotion behind them needed no interpretation. People of the Craxi Empire, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Coalition. For over a year, your forces have occupied our world, killed our people, and destroyed our cities. You came here believing us weak, primitive, easy prey. You were wrong. The voice remained calm, measured, almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. We have studied your species, learned your weaknesses, and identified the location of your homeworld. We know about your colonies, your trade routes, and your military installations. This war will not end with Earth's surrender. It will end with humanity standing victorious over the ruins of your empire. Zethrak stopped the recording, his hands trembling. That transmission changed everything. For the first time in Craxi history, another species had threatened our homeworld. The High Command was furious, but also terrified. How could a pre-spaceflight civilization even know where Craxus Prime was located, much less threaten it? A senior intelligence officer spoke up. Empty threats from a desperate enemy. How could Earthbound humans possibly reach our core systems? That's exactly what the High Command thought, Zethrak replied. 3 days later, our deep space monitoring stations detected multiple objects entering Craxi space at impossible velocities. The humans had somehow built interstellar missiles. The room erupted in disbelief, but Zethrak continued. They had stripped everything useful from our crashed scout ships and invasion equipment, combined it with their own technology, and created the most terrifying weapons the galaxy had ever seen. Not ships designed to carry crews safely across space, but pure instruments of destruction launched at near light speeds. He reactivated the holographic display, showing tactical readouts from the attacks. The first missile struck our mining operation in the Outer Reach, complete annihilation. The second destroyed a military depot in the Beta sector. The third eliminated an entire fleet stationed at our forward base in the Gamma Quadrant. Zethrak's cybernetic implants sparked as his stress levels spiked. But the missiles themselves weren't the most frightening part. Each one carried a message for any survivors. The same message, broadcast in perfect Craxi. This is what happens when you threaten Earth. Withdraw immediately or face complete annihilation. The intelligence officer looked pale. How did they learn our language so perfectly? It takes years of study to achieve that level of fluency. They didn't study our language, Zethrak replied grimly. They downloaded the entire contents of our educational databases during their infiltration operations. While we were fighting their soldiers, their scientists were absorbing everything they needed to wage war across the galaxy. He stood and walked to the wall of medical reports. The psychological warfare escalated from there. Every attack was accompanied by detailed intelligence about Craxi military operations that humans shouldn't have possessed. They knew the names of our officers, the locations of our families, the details of our personal lives. Zethrak pulled down one of the reports, his voice becoming hollow. They began targeting specific individuals, not just any Craxi, but the ones responsible for particularly brutal attacks on Earth. They would send personal messages to these officers, showing detailed surveillance of their home colonies, their family members, their daily routines. The room grew silent as the implications sank in. The message was clear. We know who you are, we know where you live, and we can reach you anywhere in the galaxy. The psychological impact on our forces was devastating. How do you fight an enemy that somehow knows everything about you? Zethrak returned to his chair, looking exhausted. But the absolute worst revelation came during our analysis of captured human technology. We discovered that everything they had done, the missiles, the intelligence gathering, the precise targeting, was accomplished using primarily our own equipment and captured personnel. An engineering officer frowned. What do you mean? Humans have an ability we lack entirely, Zethrak explained. They can make anyone want to help them, not through torture or mind control, but through something they call empathy. They showed our captured soldiers images of Earth before the invasion. Beautiful cities, peaceful families, children playing in parks. His voice cracked. Then they showed the same locations after our bombardments. The children's schools reduced to rubble, the parks turned into graveyards, the families torn apart by our weapons. They made our own people understand exactly what we had done. Zethrak stood and walked to the window again. By the time we rescued those prisoners, many of them could barely function in combat roles anymore. They had seen the war through human eyes, and it broke something inside them. Some refused to fight entirely. Others deliberately provided false intelligence to protect human civilians. The senior officers exchanged worried glances. The humans called it moral injury, the psychological damage caused by participating in acts that violate your fundamental beliefs about right and wrong. They weaponized our own conscience against us. Zethrak turned back to face the group. After 8 months of this psychological warfare, the High Command made a decision that still haunts our species. They ordered a complete orbital bombardment of Earth. Not targeted strikes against military installations, but total planetary sterilization. The room fell completely silent. The order was given on day 543. Every Craxi ship in the system was to open fire simultaneously and continue until the planet's surface was molten rock. No survivors, no prisoners, no mercy. Zethrak's cybernetic arm began sparking more violently. But when the order came through, something unprecedented happened. 17 of our ship commanders refused to comply. They had been in communication with human prisoners and couldn't bring themselves to commit genocide. A junior officer whispered, "Mutiny?" "Mass mutiny," Zethrak confirmed. "The largest military rebellion in Craxi history. Ships firing on each other while humans watched from the planet below. Brother killing brother while the enemy we came to destroy provided medical aid to survivors from both sides." He collapsed back into his chair. The humans ended the war by doing something no military strategist could have predicted. They offered to surrender on condition that all Craxi personnel, loyal and mutinous alike, would be allowed to return home safely. The assembled officers stared in disbelief. "They saved us," Zethrak said simply. "After everything we had done to their world, they negotiated a peace that protected Craxi lives, even the ones who had bombed their cities and killed their children." He looked around the room at each face. The treaty was simple. All Craxi forces would withdraw from Earth and never return. In exchange, humans would provide medical aid to our wounded and safe passage home for everyone. No war crimes trials, no demands for reparations, no revenge. Zethrak's voice became barely audible. As our ships prepared to leave Earth's system, human vessels approached under flags of truce. They brought supplies, medical equipment, and food for our journey home. The same people whose world we had tried to destroy were ensuring we wouldn't starve on the way back to Craxus Prime. The veteran stood one final time, his scarred face reflecting years of guilt and confusion. That's when I finally understood what makes humans truly terrifying. It's not their weapons or their tactics or their refusal to surrender. It's their capacity for mercy, even when mercy makes no logical sense. He walked to the door, then paused. Every other species in the galaxy fights to win, fights to survive, or fights for resources. Humans fight for principles that they value more than victory itself. They'll die for concepts like justice, freedom, and dignity. But more terrifyingly, they'll show mercy for the same reasons. Zethrak opened the door, then delivered his final words. The High Command classified this entire war and forbade any public discussion of what happened on Earth. They're terrified that other species will learn the truth about human nature. But I think the real fear is that we'll learn the truth about ourselves. He stepped into the corridor. We discovered that we're not the civilized warriors we believed ourselves to be. We're just another predatory species that happened to develop spaceflight before our conscience caught up with our capabilities. Humans forced us to confront what we really are, and most of us couldn't handle the reflection. As the door sealed behind him, the officers sat in stunned silence, each struggling to process the implications of Zethrak's story. Outside their viewport, the stars looked different somehow, less welcoming, more dangerous. Somewhere out there was a species that had turned warfare itself into a tool for teaching moral lessons. The youngest officer finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Commander Zethrak never said whether we won or lost the war. The senior intelligence officer looked up from his hands. I think that was the point. When fighting humans, the traditional concepts of victory and defeat become meaningless. They redefined what the war was even about. As the group dispersed, each officer carried with them a new understanding of the universe. They had learned that the most dangerous species in the galaxy wasn't the one with the best weapons or the strongest military. It was the one that could make you question everything you believed about right and wrong, and then forgive you for your failures while you were still trying to figure out what you had done.